right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Watchtime, your weekly download and everything gaming and business and YouTube and all that fun stuff. My name's Muzok. I'm a YouTuber with a few million subscribers. My co-host is Grace.
Heya, I'm Grace. I run Click Management, one of the world's biggest YouTube management agencies for gamers. And we're back, episode 2.
Because episode 1 was just took over the world. So we decided, you know what, we'll do a second one. Why not?
Give the people what they want.
Exactly.
All right, on this week's episode, we're going to be chatting a bunch of stuff. Is Fortnite dying? What's the state of the game? Ninja's new Fortnite skin that came out, the 100 Thieves merch drop. We've got Fortnite coming to the Australian Open, and we're going to talk about YouTubers doing original content on platforms. So YouTube is getting Netflix shows, YouTube is getting YouTube Red shows, and why it's happening, if it works, who's doing it well, who's doing it poorly.
A lot of people doing it poorly, definitely.
Yeah. But
that's the topic for later.
First of all, how was your week, Elliot?
Pretty good. I did my first YouTube stream. Lots of fun. 12 hours. Raised a bunch of money for charity. Super fun. And then I got sick. And I didn't
deathly ill.
Yep. Didn't do anything for the rest of the week because creator, and my girlfriend infected me. I got infected by all the people around me. And I managed to avoid giving it to anyone because I'm great at, not sharing.
So it was a good first stream.
Yeah, really good first stream. Got one stream done and then got knocked out for the week. So beautiful. How about you? Good week?
Start. It was a bloody hectic week last week. I think it was insane. Monday, we announced you and Lannon, both with your YouTube contracts, which was super exciting and months in the making. So it was amazing to be able to finally talk about that and see you guys start streaming. We announced our massive Fight the Fires charity stream, which was all pulled together pretty quickly, but on the whole, like a pretty massive success. We had some incredible involvement from some of our friends near and far, which was amazing. And then we launched the potty, which was fun. So, all in all, a very exciting, big week, but that's how we like it. So
very hectic.
All right, let's get into it. First topic for today, we're going to talk about the state of Fortnite. Where's it at?
Horrible.
And why, basically, give us a little bit of a backstory from a creative perspective. Tell us about the moment that you remember Fortnite launched and then what the last 2 years have been like since then.
Yeah, I mean, Fortnite, I've done YouTube for a lot of different games. I've done YouTube for TF2. I've done YouTube for Overwatch. And, obviously a bunch of variety in the middle. And of all of them, Fortnite, has always just been the best. I mean, they're all similar in the sense that they're all kind of linear multiplayer games where every time you load into a roughly 20-minute game, you do something, and then at the end of that 20 minutes, the game is over. Mm-hmm. Fortnite was the best of those three because it, number one, allowed for so much creativity just with building. The number of kind of like the variety of things you could do off the bat was just instantly so much better with the way you could build up and, sit at the top of the map, or you could create these crazy things. Long story short, the actual just base gameplay in Fortnite, better than any other game I made videos on. Variety when you're making videos is everything because you need to try and crank out a video every day. And not only that, you need to crank out a hopefully unique video every day. So you need to be trying to think up things that people haven't done before. And then Fortnite built on top of that because it used to be standard. 10 years ago, games released, or 15 years ago, games released. They did not update. You would be like, oh, yep, we released Mario.
Pay $60.
Yeah, pay $60. This is Mario. That's the game. And you buy the game today, it's the same game you would have got back in 1990. But these days, games are very much, kind of more about updating. And there were games like Overwatch, which would update once every month. And when I say update, it would basically be they'd rehash something they'd done before. But it was like at least a little bit of content, which is the lifeblood for a YouTuber.
Fortnite, I think, completely redefined content or redefined gaming from a content creator perspective. So
YouTubers loved them.
If you're a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer, I think Fortnite really did what had never been done before. They created a game that was almost designed for creators, right? Like weekly updates. It was beautiful to look at. It was colorful. It was bright. It wasn't gory or dark.
Yeah.
And the weekly updates in particular, I think, just created this hype. every week.
Yeah.
So if you're a big Fortnite creator, you can't miss uploads. You've got to keep talking about Fortnite because it's
but also
so
it's
relevant.
easy to keep talking about Fortnite. I mean, so I
Totally.
think pretty much from when the game first dropped, every single week there was an update. And it was insane. I remember just thinking, there's no way they can keep this going. You just can't keep thinking of things to put in the game. But almost every single week there was a new item, a new weapon, a new launch pad, a new something. And every single time they added something new to the game, that meant a new, normally at least 1 to 2 new videos, which once again, as a content creator, is everything. On top of that, the map would be evolving constantly. Things were going insane and it just kept going crazier and crazier. It started off by just adding items. Then the map would start doing crazy stuff. And then towards season 8 or 9, it was, the map was evolving every single week. They were adding these giant new zones. There were mechs in the game that were blowing everything up. Everyone was going insane. There was too much content. And then we got to season X, which is this season. And it was almost like they realized that they had a little bit too much fun at the frat party and everyone just woke up with a really big hangover and they were like, whoa, we got to slow down, man. This is a little bit crazy. And they went from updating the game every single week, not only updating the game, changing the entire map every single week, adding a new item every week, to this season, I believe they've added really 1 new item to the game the whole season. And it's been the longest season ever in the last 3 months. Normally in this amount of time, we would have had about 12 to 15 updates, a whole lot of map changes. We've had really 1 minor update, which added a new weapon, which is crazy. And the map has, with the exception of a couple of little things around Christmas, done nothing, which has been very interesting as a content creator.
And the communication seems to have dropped a bit. Like, I remember when, back in the glory days of Fortnite, people would be hanging out for the patch notes, like ahead of updates. You would be like, what's going to happen? And people would be reading the patch notes on videos and that sort of thing. Whereas now, even that sort of dropped off. And it's curious because you kind of wonder what's happening over at Epic right now, because they have an insane developer team. That is undeniable. Like, their dev team must be next level.
What do you do with billions of dollars? You hire a bunch of developers.
But what are they doing? What are they working on?
Well, that's why it has me excited, because I think a lot of people, they look at the way Fortnite is right now and they go, oh, wow, okay, they've stopped the updates. They have, they're not changing the map anymore. They're not communicating. They're not even bothering to release patch notes. They've just given up. And it's like, no, you don't. Epic is a company. You don't have a game that made $1.5 billion last year and then go, oh, we're a little bit bored of that. Hey, we might just, pop off. It's like, no, that's not a thing. If you're a business and something is making money, you don't give up on it. So I think that, and I think there's also been a lot of really cryptic stuff from the developers as well. They've been talking a lot about, they're really trying to turn Fortnite from just a battle royale game into, I believe they're using the term metaverse, which is, I know,
better than world.
I know, better than a world. But I think the idea is that it can be a hub for pretty much anything. I think that's their goal, is that Fortnite is the sandbox on top of which anything can happen, which is absolutely the right way to go. You look at, the biggest kind of long surviving games. Basic example would be, something like Minecraft. You've also got stuff like Roblox, which, introduces that sandbox element. Any big long-term game forms the basis for people to just create on top of. And Fortnite took the first step when they added creative mode. And my theory for why they haven't updated the game in months and months and months is they must be just building something huge. They must be building some huge behind-the-scenes infrastructure, which they're planning on dropping, which is going to completely, I hope, as a content creator, maybe I'm just getting a little bit too excited for my own sake, but that will totally redefine what Fortnite can do as an engine and the way it runs and the way people play the game.
Yeah. I think there's no way that they could be a company that is moving at such pace with such frequency of updates and just massive growth to doing almost a 180 and really, really slowing down just because they don't have any more ideas. I don't believe that. I think that they're too smart, they're too clever, they're seeing too far down the line of what's possible to do that. So I think, is Fortnite dead? I mean... Fortnite's
definitely... Fortnite's just not... It's still the biggest thing. That's the crazy thing. Everyone's like, oh, Fortnite's dead. No, Fortnite is still by far massively, undeniably huge. There is no other game out there that will consistently pull the amount of engagement that Fortnite will. I mean, like Minecraft may be close, but that's like, always been a long running thing in the background. But, and also just the fact that there's nothing else on the horizon even close to taking its place. I don't think Fortnite can be taken out anytime soon. And I think when it does get taken out, it's going to be by something that people don't really see coming.
Yeah.
But also like I have full faith in Epic. I think Epic, like any big company, there's always that cycle where it gets to a point where as soon as you're a big company, you're doing well, people are going to not like you. Epic is more switched on than I think, and I've worked with a lot of companies doing YouTube. They understand, like they do, they get the space. I mean, you can debate on the finer points, like are they doing esports perfectly? But in terms of they understand what a game needs to do to succeed in the long term.
And in 2020.
And they have the flexibility, and in 2020. And they also have, unlike any other company, the flexibility of, number one, they literally built the engine that their game is on from the ground up. They made Unreal Engine, which means they're literally like the gods of their own playground. Also, they have a really good company culture of, I think, just really kind of going. I think sometimes they push it a little bit, they go a little bit too aggressive on just moving quickly, which is why you see some glitches get in the game. But you see the opposite spectrum of that with a game like Overwatch, where they are just so locked down and like every pixel must be perfectly shaded. Yeah. And you see that, and they don't manage to update the game really for 3 years. And when they finally announce Overwatch 2, it's basically just Overwatch 1. But and I still think probably the Overwatch team's working on some big stuff, but they definitely didn't have that nimble aspect that Epic had. Yeah. I think Epic understands the space. They own the engine. They are very, very nimble on their feet. And also they have a few $1 billion, which doesn't hurt.
I think Epic epitomizes moving fast and hard, and they would rather release an update with a couple glitches or mistakes than not release an update at all. And they understand that the value really is in them moving fast and not necessarily in constantly being perfect.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I guess my final note on the stoking the hype train point would be, I found it very, very interesting that Epic actually announced which they've never done for any season before. This season was already, I believe, going to be the longest, and they announced a delay to the next season starting of about.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
No, they announced it. They announced like a month and a half ago. It was an almost like 2-month delay. So the new season was supposed to be happening, I believe, very, very start of January or even December.
True, because it's been
December.
About 3 months.
Yeah, it's been way longer than a normal season. A normal season runs for 8 weeks or something. I think this one's almost been double. And they announced a delay. And I'm hoping, put me on a cross from wrong, but I reckon they have some big, big features that they're looking to launch with the next season. And they realized they couldn't quite get them done in time. And they've pushed the season back because they're working on huge features that they want to drop in the next season. And I know from talking to, some of the team, what like the kind of things that they've got their eye on. And it's definitely in that vein of giving Fortnite that just infinite lifespan. And I'm really hoping that we're going to see some of those arrive, because that would be...
That's Muzok's predictions. Stay tuned for when the new season launches, and you can call him out if he's completely wrong and there's no new updates.
Don't sue me.
All right, moving on. Let's jump to our next segment, which is on the feed. A couple people commented on the YouTube video, which we uploaded, and had some creative ideas for what we should call on the feed, but I can't remember them. Anyway.
Poor organization.
Basically, this is where we're going to discuss a couple of the headlines that we've seen on Twitter this week that have just been what's been happening in the gaming world. So first one we're going to talk about is the 100 Thieves merch drop. So they released their first merch drop for the year. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is I think 100 Thieves really made a name for themselves and just killed it in a way that no other org or gaming company really has by massively creating that hype around merch, and it not just being slapping your logo on a t-shirt, but them really considering how they do it and doing those drops that allow them to sell out whatever that actually means.
Yeah.
And do it that way. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely weren't the first people to do drops or do limited drops or have the whole sellout thing going on, but they definitely did it better than anyone else. And I don't know what exactly, I think that it was a really good mixture of their branding, the way they marketed it, the way they communicated. I think that whole, I mean, quote unquote, artificial scarcity thing is really, really interesting because, you know, it's just such a talking point.
Yeah.
Because I think the number one way I hear about 100 Thieves merch isn't people being like, oh, look at this shirt I've got, or I really like the design. It's, did you hear 100 Thieves merch sold out in under 20 seconds when they did this drop or something like that?
Well, I got one of the limited edition hoodies.
And it's
or
even
whatever.
like popping up on like Hypebeast websites now. And that's crazy. And that's genius because realistically, you could, I could go out right now and I could release a shirt and I could have a stock of 2 and I could be like, guys, we're dropping the new Muselk shirt Tuesday. First 2 people buy it. I'm like, sold out, guys. Oh my God, you sold it out. And once again, I'm sure, and I'm actually 100% confident, 100 Thieves is doing huge volume in what they're selling. But I think back in the day when they first launched the brand, and I think these days they 100% are capable of doing big volume. But I'm sure back in the day when they did their first few drops, it was a very tactical decision to probably run at a loss even or not far off and just severely limit the amount that they were selling to create that scarcity. Yeah. And basically, so people would see all their favorite YouTubers wearing it. Their favorite YouTubers would want to wear it because they hear it's rare and their viewers like the rare stuff. And then for the couple of hundred people who get it, they feel super lucky. But then the outward image is, oh my God, 100 Thieves does the hottest merch on the market. And you literally can't get it because they drop it and it's gone.
Yeah, they did an amazing job of that. I mean, just a rumor, hold me to it, but I think I heard in their first year, around the time or before they'd got their Series A funding, that their limited edition drops were about 300 items per drop, which is not that much. I mean, it is with the reach that they have. It would be easy to say that sells out in 20 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. But and then you add like 200 for like sending that to different YouTubers and
but more power to them for creating that model, and it really does go a long way to what I think they've built on now in creating a really powerful brand for 100 Thieves. And the fact that they can get it popping up on Hypebeast websites after for an esports org is pretty crazy. And I'm excited to see what more orgs do in the future in terms of developing their brands beyond just teams.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is Ninja being one of the first creators or the first creator to really get their own custom skin in-game for Fortnite. And I think it's a good follow-on from what we discussed earlier about how Fortnite's developing the game, and maybe this is a teaser that there are bigger things to come. But this week we saw Ninja release his skin. Epic announced a number of other creators, including Loserfruit, who we work with, that she'll be getting a skin in game, and Pokimane released her emote, which was pretty cool as well. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Epic's, they're not the first to do it. I think League of Legends especially has maybe done a little bit of integrating YouTubers and streamers into the game before, or at least kind of giving them packs, I believe. Definitely ones like, H1Z1, etc. But long story short, I reckon it's awesome. I think Epic's always seen the value of having YouTubers and streamers really kind of become more part of that ecosystem of really spending in game.
100%.
I mean, you've always seen it in games like Counter-Strike when YouTubers make stuff like, the knives in CSGO and all the weapon skins and hats and all that kind of stuff. When they make that a big part of their content, obviously like the culture itself plays into the whole thing, but YouTube's ability to kind of take that and push it out further and really just build that excitement and that hype around just items in general, it has always been crazy. And I think that, you look at something like the supporter creator program, which, certain channels made millions and millions from, but the interesting thing is that, from Epic, that's 5%. They gave away 5%, 1/20th. And I guarantee that not only from the viewer's perspective, they would be spending 5% more because they want to feel like they're supporting their favorite YouTuber. And also the fact that they've got their favorite YouTubers and channels saying like, use my code, get this thing. Oh my God, look at this skin. This skin's so good. It's like leveraging the biggest giant marketing machine behind your product. And then on top of that, you've also just... once again, it's that 5%. Like it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And I think that giving Ninja that skin in game is really just the next evolution of that. It's kind of just taking it to that next level.
Yeah, I think Epic has always done an amazing job recognizing the value of creators and the value of having creators invested in their game. And I think this is just the next progression of that. And I'm keen to see where they take it and what else they do with it. And I think that's something that we could see. That's something I would foresee in the future as a possibility with Epic, like going back to what we were saying earlier about creators almost having their own worlds or their own little servers within Fortnite would be super cool. But support a creator, man, I feel like I don't know if audiences really understand how insane that was for creators. At the peak of support a creator.
4 times months.
At the peak of support a creator, I guarantee you some of your biggest YouTubers and streamers are making more money from support a creator than they are off their ad rev on YouTube. That is 100% a possibility. It was...
And big channels as well who are making a lot off ad rev.
Absolutely insane. People joke about the fact that Tfue and that sort of thing got code Tfue tattooed, or was it Banks that got code Tfue tattooed?
I know Code Laser got Code Laser tattooed.
Yeah. But there's a reason for that. It was extremely impactful.
I mean, hey, look, I can't say anything. I don't think you signed a contract, but I'm definitely I'm
saying it was impactful.
It was very impactful.
It was a big
very
deal.
impactful, and it's great because it's a mutual benefit. You have, I think, small creators where once again, it just because it's so impactful, it suddenly turns, especially I love the way that they integrated support a creator into the, creative mode. So the people who make really good maps get
great.
People to use their code.
Amazing.
And then suddenly you've got people who make maps in Fortnite who would normally have zero financial kind of
incentive
compensation from that. Yeah. They suddenly are like, oh my God, like I made a popular map and now I can do this as a full-time job.
Yeah.
Like that's insane. And I think that that's awesome. I think that was my favorite way where I saw support a creator leverage. Like obviously like there's the whole like it's great giving, YouTubers and Twitch streamers more ways to make revenue. But I think the coolest thing was that they found something that doesn't normally make any revenue at all, which is just, doing that custom map creation. And they found a way to literally give people full-time jobs doing that. Like Dolphin Dom, like people, I know a lot of the map makers that, my friends work with are now able to do that as a job, not just from like YouTubers who'll get them to make a map, but also that support a creator.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And thirdly, on the Fortnite news, God, we've got a lot of Fortnite news this week.
It's big Fortnite day.
But the Australian Open is doing a Fortnite competition. I think it's really, really cool to see how traditional sports are getting on board with games, and you're seeing more and more of a tie between traditional entertainment industries like sport or movies, whatever, that are tying in with gaming. And it's a really impressive step forward. It's the second time that Tennis Australia has done it, and I'm keen to see what happens.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I love all these big live events. I think it's definitely cool seeing games go more and more mainstream. I think you've seen for a little while now a lot of kind of mainstream things from, TV to everything, just trying to like understand what this whole gaming thing is more and more and more. And I think you've seen different toes dipped in different ways. But I think that it's crazy when they realize that a lot of these just online tournaments will pull more kind of, number one, they pull attention to the whole event, but also just number two, like they will really, get a pretty decent number of people into a stadium for video games. Yeah. Which is awesome. And then obviously I'm sure they have Epic supporting it as well, which makes it all easier. Mm-hmm. They get to bring in a whole new generation for tennis, which might not normally be like engaging with that. But yeah, I love it.
Love to see it.
Live events, just on a personal note, like love going to them because it's such an incredible vibe. Like when you're a YouTuber, you only really get to, mostly you're interacting in the online space. So you have, like, oh, 1 million people watched a video today. Cool. I'm just going to,
still in my office
go home,
every day.
like still in my office, just sipping my water, you know? And then you go to a stadium and you have 200 people, like literally 1/5000th of that number who might like chant your name or something. And you're just like, whoa,
This is real.
This is power.
Yeah.
I control all the 12-year-olds and I will command them at my will, you know, like, and just orchestrating that number of people, you just realize like the scale of everything. It kind of puts faces to the numbers.
It's definitely amazing to see it play out in real life.
Very
All right, and on to our last segment and our second deep dive of the day. We're going to talk about YouTubers doing highly produced original content. So YouTubers that are getting into Netflix shows or YouTube Red shows or talk shows. Lily Singh recently, I think, was the big example of this. She got her own late night show. And honestly, I think anyone would probably say that the reviews of it have been pretty overwhelmingly negative.
Really? Haven't watched too much.
Really. So this is something that I think about a lot because I think that for the longest time, social media or YouTube or Twitch was sort of seen as the ugly little sister to movies and traditional TV shows and Hollywood production and that sort of thing. It was seen as a stepping stone, or if you're lucky, you could make it to TV, or you could make it onto a movie, or you could get a Netflix show maybe. And it was sort of seen as, obviously that's the main goal, and YouTube is down here a little bit. And it's really interesting because obviously YouTube's been around 10 to 12 years now. There are creators that have just developed mass audiences that have then been able to go and take them to traditional media formats. And I think you've seen different iterations of how that works, but I don't think it's necessarily been all that successful all the time. And I think it's still a conversation piece where a lot of people think that's the ultimate or that's the next level. Whereas now, sometimes I think people are kind of changing their tune and they're kind of, at least from an audience perspective, anti the traditional entertainment route and pro YouTuber because it actually has a huge amount of benefits that traditional media doesn't have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit interesting. You can tell a lot of the time when traditional media tries to reach into the YouTuber space, I don't think it's so much because they like the content or they understand the content. They just look at their audience like, oh my God, our entire viewership is a bunch of 60 to 80-year-old people who are, you know,
about to die.
Yeah, we're not really, you know, they're not coming into their prime. They're kind of more on the way out. Like, what is our plan here? And I think so. It's really them, and they're like, oh my God, wow, all these 20-year-olds, shockingly, don't want to watch 3 minutes of ads for every 4 minutes of content.
Yeah.
All these 20-year-olds don't want to be told when they need to watch what they want to watch.
No.
They want to engage with, you know, things immediately. And I think, you know, that's largely the reflection of that is that, you know, they're reaching and they're trying to pull that audience over. They're trying to pull her audience from YouTube onto whatever platform she's on. I think that, I think there's a lot of different facets to this topic because it's about, you know, where is it hosted? It's also about what the way they kind of like put that content together, you know, how do they make it? What, you know, are they actually saying we want the YouTuber or are they saying we want the YouTuber to play a part in this, you know, which I think that's even more interesting. But last things on the platform point, because I think that's most important. I think, once again, I haven't watched Lily Singh's show, but I think, you know, I'd be interested to know, is the negative feedback because the show's bad? Very possibly, from what I've heard on the grapevine. But also, I think the internet, especially more than anyone, if they don't like something, they will witch hunt.
Yes.
And I think that if you've got your favorite YouTuber who's like, oh, like if you want to keep watching me, like you have to be sitting on your couch at 7 p.m. on C-SPAN where you watch 8 minutes of ads and then I'll come out and tell a joke, they're going to be like, no, this sucks. And they're just going to pan it.
Yeah.
So I think that's also the danger is that a lot of the time you try and push the internet one way, it will backfire hard because they'll push back.
Yeah, I think we're in a new generation now. I remember when I was a kid, back in the day, you know, it used to be like, oh, my favorite show is going to be on at 7:30 p.m. on a Wednesday and I would wait for it. Whereas now people just have way higher expectations. They don't want to be told when and where they're able to watch content. They want to be able to watch it on their mobile when they're literally anywhere in the world, whenever they want. And I think traditional media hasn't quite caught up with that. And that's something that the internet, obviously in the nature of it, has just done so well. And I think it's really interesting to see now how traditional platforms are actually kind of doing a 180 on that. And now you're seeing a bunch of traditional shows like Ellen, like Jimmy Fallon, like a lot of the traditional media publications creating content that is designed for YouTube. Vogue now has a huge online YouTube presence of content because they're making content that's specifically for YouTube where they can hit a young audience.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny to me that it used to be this whole dream for YouTubers to be able to make it to traditional media, whereas now it's actually traditional media that's going the other way around.
Yeah. And I know that like we've had a lot of instances where like traditional media might want to like cover, you know, YouTube or, you know, have one of the YouTubers on like a game show that we manage or something like that. And like 99% of the time, everyone's like, ew, no.
And
so I want to stay away from that.
Yeah, I think audience as well, and it was a really good point you made earlier about whether or not are they getting the YouTuber to play themselves or are they getting the YouTuber to act. And I think both of those things can have pros and cons, but oftentimes I think audiences don't love it because the amazing thing about YouTube content and the thing that makes YouTube content so unique and different to traditional media is that it's so raw and that there's no filter between the audience and you as a creator except the camera. There's no production crew. There's no editing process beyond what you're editing yourself for the most part.
Yeah.
And I think people love feeling that authenticity in a time where people are bombarded with ads. They're bombarded with like overwhelming media in the day-to-day. It's so nice to be able to connect with someone that might be anywhere in the world and just have that feel so raw.
Yeah.
And when media takes that away and suddenly they're putting them in a costume or with makeup when they don't usually wear makeup and they're reading a script, suddenly it's like, this isn't the person that I watch. The whole reason that I like that person is completely irrelevant now.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the biggest reasons that YouTube, I think, has become so successful is that, you know, TV's obviously always been, you know, it's not real and it's not genuine. And even the real genuine shows are people playing a part. And I think that one of the big reasons that YouTube took off is just people have just gotten increasingly better at seeing through that. You know, that's one of the biggest things is just that there was a point where, you know, you could kind of have that veneer and just accept it. I watch TV now and you can very, very clearly, you can see the lights, you can see the cameras, you can see all that kind of stuff. And I think YouTube is a real pushback to just like, we want that authentic engagement with someone. So I think it's very, very interesting when you see all those like the more highly produced stuff kind of come through, and they're obviously, you know, wanting to, and they're obviously wanting to, you know, kind of get the audience from those people, but they seem to at the same time completely ignore the reason those people have an audience in the first place, which is their authentic personality. But, you know, I think the thing, like the Lily Singh show is one where they've clearly tried to, you know, give her a bit more authenticity. But the ones that just make zero sense to me are half the stuff that, which in reality should be the platforms that are most engaged with it, are the ones where like Netflix, or especially in YouTube really surprises me with this, like their YouTube Red series where, I forget what the one that Logan Paul was in was called.
Oh yeah.
But where they try and make, they just try and make a movie. And it's like, what? Like, what are you doing? Like Logan, he's a personality. His audience knows when he's an actor in a movie. And no offense, Logan, there's better actors out there, you know? If I wanted to go and watch an actor, I'd go and watch a real actor. I don't want to watch a YouTuber be a really bad actor. And I think that's...
And if you want to watch Logan Paul, you want to watch Logan Paul.
And almost every single bit of YouTube Red content I saw in the early months, it was just all really... It was all YouTubers acting. I didn't see a single YouTube Red show where people were being themselves. And I think the first one that I actually engaged with and I watched a lot of the content of was when the Sidemen did that Sidemen on Tour thing. And that was just the Sidemen being the sideman with more
with
production.
more money.
Yeah, literally. Long story short, I think it's going to be interesting to see how all that content evolves. I know you and I have had some very interesting discussions with people over the last few weeks. Just kind of like I think you're finding a lot of people are entering the space. People are starting to realize that, obviously YouTube is continuing to grow and will continue to grow at an incredible pace. Authentic personalities, YouTubers, Instagrammers, they're the kind of people that the new generation want to engage with. Right now, I think that people are very much also realizing that the way content is being done, that premium high-produced content, the way YouTube Red's done it, Netflix, TV, with YouTubers is not the right way to do it, or at least in a lot of cases isn't the right way.
Yeah.
And I think people are starting to figure out that, you really do need to find a way to blend the advantages of higher production with also the reason that people watch YouTubers in the first place, which is because they want to watch the YouTuber. They don't want to watch an actor being played that the YouTuber's trying to be.
Totally.
Because YouTubers aren't good at that. We suck.
All right. Moving on to the last segment where you and I ask each other a question that has been submitted by a listener. Do you want to go first this week?
You go first. I went first last week.
So you're asking me the question then?
No, you're asking me the question. This is very confusing. Ask me the question. I asked first last week.
Okay. Before you were doing YouTube full time, actually restart that. Okay. When you started YouTube, did you have a specific plan to get to a point where you were doing YouTube full time, or was that just something that sort of evolved?
It definitely evolved. I mean, when I made my first video, it was just because, just for the fun of it, for the excitement, and because also I think making videos and having a couple of little YouTube subscribers was always a little bit of a passion point for me. I wouldn't say that, I really had a plan in terms of growing it. Obviously, I wanted to grow it. And I think as soon as there was definitely a point, I think, where I was like, okay, I'm going to take it a little bit more seriously, try and upload at least with a semblance of regularity, and also try and have content that people will want to watch rather than just whatever stuff I want to spew out there. I wouldn't really say that I ever had like a plan for how to go full time. Because the plan for how to go full time is just what you should be doing in the first place, which is how can I make the best videos? How can I, improve my own content? And
it happened relatively quickly for you.
Yeah, I think actually when I kind of started focusing on like going mainstream, quote unquote, that was probably when I made my worst content, because I think it was, and I think I saw a lot of comments on it within my like community, that right after I made the decision to like go full time, and really like do it, quote unquote, properly, I made a bunch of changes that were just horrible. I became like that generic YouTuber, with the really bright thumbnails and like arrows and thumbnails all over the place. And suddenly I was talking different and, kind of being like, just changed a lot. And I think that, so I think I mistook being, kind of that super, being like the YouTubers that I'd seen, as opposed to just developing my own style. So I think it was definitely a journey that went through many, many phases. But I got there eventually. And hey, it worked out. Whatever the plan I had, I don't know what that plan was, but clearly it went okay. So, all right. And my question is, how do you deal with the stress of your job, which is managing a bunch of prima donna YouTubers, myself included?
Have a couple wines at the end of every day.
You heard it here first, people. Alcohol. That's how you deal with your problems.
No. Although sometimes. No. I think the stress... I think the way that I think about stress, and this doesn't work all the time because I definitely do get stressed at times, but the way that I think about stress is that when you're trying your hardest at something or you're working on something you're passionate about, you're going to care a lot about the outcomes. And I care a lot about the outcomes of everyone that I work with and what I do. And so inevitably when you care, stress will just come hand in hand in that, especially when we're working in an industry like gaming and YouTube that moves so rapidly. It moves very, very quickly. You constantly need to be thinking on your toes and adaptable and flexible. So inevitably stress will come with that. But what I try to think of is that, you know, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And basically that I'm very, very blessed to be doing a job that I love and to be able to work with brilliant creative people that challenge me as well. And yeah, that basically it's a stress that I choose. So I would much, much rather have a stress that comes from working in a job that I love and am passionate about than one that comes from the opposite, which would be probably more stressful. So that's I think how I deal with the stress, plus a couple wines after work.
Wow. Wholesome.
Does a good job.
With a little bit of alcoholism at the end there. You love it. The complete package.
All right. Guys, I think that's about all we have time for on our episode 2 of Watchtime. Remember to follow us on our Facebook group. We're getting that started as a little bit of a community so we can talk about topics that are happening on the podcast or topics that you'd like us to talk about, find like-minded people there. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. That is super important and helps us get up in the algorithm. So please do that. Follow us on Spotify, follow us on YouTube, all of the places. We're literally everywhere now, which is exciting.
Please, we're desperate.
All right, guys, that's about it for week 2, and we will see you guys in the next one.
Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.